Are we all here? Oh, a lot of familiar faces. Can you all hear me?
Can you hear us?
Okay, good, good.
Barbara?
Are we ready to go?
Barbara?
I'll get started, and if more people pop in, so much the better. Um, Normally, when I start these things, I take notes, and it's just a few words that I write down to kind of talk about. Today, I've got a whole full page of notes because there's just so much to talk about. And my head was spinning this morning when I was coming up with all these things I wanted to throw onto the floor for conversation. I think it's pretty hard not to start with the idea that the U.S. is going to take over Gaza. It's going to become the Riviera of the Middle East, and that's the new vision for what we're going to see in the Middle East. And I just wanted to ask you your views on this, and how do you feel about this? Do you think this is kind of a crazy idea, a good idea, or I just don't know how to think about it yet. I because it came out of the blue, and I was watching the press conference yesterday with Netanyahu and Trump, and I don't even think Netanyahu knew this was about to be offered. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts about this. Steve, go ahead.
Well, I think it's a stupid idea. It's an illegal idea. And if we haven't made enough enemies around the world, it certainly will contribute to making more. You don't just, it's like taking over Greenland, taking over the pan. You don't just march into someplace and say, it's ours. It, that's even more tyrannical than Putin's been. So, and to waste time and attention in the media and everywhere else to even have to talk about this, it's really a shame when our government has a lot it should be doing.
Okay, I think you hit on a really interesting idea here because there's the question in my mind is why was this presented? And the Washington Post this morning had proposed four reasons why Trump postulated this idea. One was, as you said, a distraction from other issues that may be more important. Uh, Two was to demonstrate a certain muscular policy for getting other things done. Three is the madman theory, which posits that he's crazy, he's unpredictable, so watch out whatever he's doing, and you might have to take him seriously. And four, this is this new idea of empire that there's this new idea that America wants to create this imperialistic era in our history, and that ties in with Canada, with Greenland, and with the Panama Canal and the Gulf of America, and all these other things we've heard about in recent days. So, anybody else have some ideas about what's going on here? Harvey?
Yeah, I have kind of a question in my mind, and it has to do with, is he using this as like a first step in negotiations to shake up the Arabs, to get them to put a force into Gaza or do something that makes some sense? But he'd have to be rational to do that, and I'm not sure he is. So I I don't know what to make of all of this, but if it were a rational person in that chair saying all of this, you'd say, oh, he's just posturing to get something else. But I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
It seems to me this is the beginning of the antithetical option of a two-state solution. And if you removed all the Palestinians from Gaza, I would think that the West Bank it would be next.
What is it?
And then you would have this idea that Israel can be a Jewish state and a democracy, because I think under certain conditions, it couldn't be both, because if you absorb Palestinians, you're going to lose the Jewishness of the country, and it would be a democracy, but you would lose a Jewish democracy. Anyway, who else has an idea here? Sylvia?
I think he's doing this so that Jared Kushner's construction company can get even richer than it is now. The Washington Post things that you mentioned all make perfect sense, but nothing about Trump makes sense. And I think he's doing this for the sake of his personal or his son-in-law's personal real estate empire.
Well, it did come out that the original idea for this, which was posited several years ago, came from Jared Kushner. And if you want to connect the dots and see condominiums at the foot of the Mediterranean, I mean, that kind of makes sense. I mean, it would be beautiful property, and it's remarkable that no Palestinian leadership thought of maybe developing it to make it, a peaceful, beautiful place. But obviously, with the real estate background of Trump and his family, I mean, it's hard to think that they're not connected in some way. But that's a very cynical point of view on it. Let's see, what else do I want to ask you about? You um, this idea of Israel's world standing. If this thing were to play out, it would also seem to fly in the face of the Saudis' desire to create normal relations with Israel, but that was predicated on a two-state solution. It seems to me that the idea of a two-state solution is as far away from reality as it ever has been. I don't really see a path back to it. Anybody have any thoughts on that? I mean, do you think this helps or hurts or what? Steve?
Well, I agree with you, but all I can say is we need to find a way to work back toward that. No one state solution. As much as I think Judea and Samaria belong to Israel, if we can wait a few millennia to have a country, we can wait a while to get the rest of it. And not finding a way back to that will mean this conflict will never end. And ultimately, I don't know how much Israel can withstand if this goes on for decades.
I would tend to agree with that. I just don't understand how you can take 2 million people and entice them to move to a different country while you make their previous homes vacation land for the rest of the world. It just
Can't they join the terrorists at the Egyptian resorts?
Yeah, they could. I think it's incredibly destabilizing because if you move the 2.2 million Palestinians out of Gaza, that would include the remainder of the Hamas membership. So that would destabilize the other countries who would take these people in. So I see no incentive for Egypt and Jordan to welcome these people in. Benjamin, you had your hand up?
Thank you. I think I have a slightly different view, which is a little bit out of the box, but I'm 66 years old, and the 6 Day War and 72 and Intifada, and I've lived through these, and I'm no international policy expert, but it just seems we've got to do something different with this situation because and I know this is a trivial thought, but every time I hate to say it, a terrorist is killed, two or three are born to come up again. And we know that something in the cycle has to change. There's that famous saying, doing the same thing, expecting a different result is the definition of insanity. And it sort of seems like we've been doing the same thing for a long time. So whether or not we turn Gaza into a resort or something, but the battling and the give and take and the fighting back and forth and the attack here, the attack there, the retaliation I don't see it sustainable. I mean, it could sustain, but you'd never have any results other than the same.
I think a lot of people agree with you on that. And I think certainly there have been some voices that have been raised in the last 24 hours that suggest exactly what you just said, that we've been doing the same thing over and over and over again. Nothing, it only gets worse, it doesn't get better. And maybe there needs to be some really, really unthought of idea thrown into the mix to try to shake up the status quo. I don't know
And,
if it's that, but it's a thought.
and just to add, the horror of October the 7th and the murder of these innocent civilians and some soldiers, there's the horror of that. But then the question came up with a professor I work with at UCLA, and again, this is one person's opinion, what will be the extent of the revenge that Israel must extract post October the 7th? And they're not really my words, but just to think of that as a thought. And here we have a death toll in Gaza, and I'm no friend of the terrorists, but the death toll, whether it's 30, 40, 50, 60,000, we don't really know, but it's certainly up there. And we have, I don't see any big change in anybody's opinion other than, a lot of dead people.
That's true. Anybody else have a thought here? Meryl, you're unusually quiet. You're also muted.
Right. Trying to unmute. I'm thinking of how you started this out, and I think that, I just finished another current event class. I feel like this is just a way to start another war, a bigger war. And I know that's a horrible thing to say, and it's not very positive, but I feel like we aren't in control anymore.
We mean
and I think that Trump and Musk are more in control. And I think that Senate, Congress, everybody that should be talking about this are afraid to say anything.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the whole Middle East conundrum now is as complicated as it's ever been. And I think a lot of it has to do with the inability and lack of pushback from any institution in the US government, because there is no other institution in the US government that has any muscle right now. And I don't know I don't know how that works. I don't know what that, I mean, it feels like the country is really turning, and this was, I think, the next subject I wanted to get to. It kind of morphs into that. But when we see what Elon Musk is doing at the behest of Trump, it's mind blowing in a way. I mean, all these norms and traditions and regulations and maybe laws are being set aside for the purpose of what? To cut a couple of $1 trillion from federal spending, which includes all our foreign aid. For what? Now, the cynical view is so that it helps fund the tax cuts. You can certainly draw a straight line there. But I do find it ironic, especially with the USAID retrenchment, that you have the world's richest man shutting off aid to the world's poorest people. And I can't get that through my head. I just think wow, that's really something. Um, and I don't, is it dangerous? Is it prudent? I mean, I realize that maybe the US government has to cut back spending. And even all these overtures toward Gaza are a way of using US muscle to get something. Now, I don't know what the something is yet. I think that'll become clear in the weeks ahead. But it's all we're in a strange new territory now. And I don't think anybody knows where it's headed in a realistic way. And I'd love to hear any of your views on this. Sylvia, go ahead.
Um, I don't think it has anything at all to do with shrinking the deficit or balancing the budget or
Tax cut.
efficiency in government. I think what it has to do is Elon Musk showing how powerful he is and Trump showing how masterful he is and thinking that bullying is the best way to make Trump famous, or more famous. Personally, I think it makes him infamous. We are coming across as a really lousy country. And if I had the nerve, I'd be embarrassed.
Mm.
Trump, his purpose is really to make everybody afraid of him and do what he says.
I think he succeeded there.
He really does want to be the top dog and run the country the way he wants to run it, as a dictator or whatever you want to call it. And so I think his idea is just to frighten everybody, fire them, whether legal or not. And you better toe to his word.
Well, to that end, I read today that there's several initiatives underway in Congress. One is they want to rename Dulles Airport to Donald J. Trump International. That's number one. Another is, which comes from Marjorie Taylor Greene. She wants Trump's likeness on Mount Rushmore, which is an idea that's kicked around for a while. And the other is a constitutional amendment to enable a president to serve a third term. So that's where this is going from that side. I mean, I suspect many people on this panel here are not crazy about Trump, but there's a big chunk of the country that is, and they're ready to go along with all this, much in the sense that he's feared. He's feared, and everybody wants to hold their seat in Congress, so they're not going to oppose him. I mean, look what's happened to the cabinet confirmation so far. Only one of his nominees was sidelined. Everybody else is getting in, and I don't think anybody else is going to get sidelined either. Steve?
I'm frankly shocked at how the Republicans in Congress have abandoned their morals, their duties to their constituents, and everything else. I thought more people had more internal strength, and if you don't get reelected, so be it. You have a higher calling. I certainly always felt that way as a lawyer. My only hope, and we've seen it happen before, is the Supreme Court. And I do think some of these justices, even the Trump appointees, with their life tenure, will not just kowtow to his will and will, for the most part, respect the Constitution. And there's just going to be lawsuit after lawsuit. I mean, I frankly think every penny saved by Musk is going to be spent 10 times over defending illegal and unconstitutional actions of the administration and court. And my hope is, and it's all I can cling to, is that the courts will save us.
You have that much faith in this court?
I don't have a lot of faith in this court, and there are a lot of issues which don't go to the core of our democracy, where they may continue to disturb me. But I think at its heart, justices on that court, after they've been there, understand their responsibilities. I mean, Neil Gorsuch authored an opinion that shocked me when he said sex in the 14th Amendment includes sexual orientation, which I'm sure nobody thought was the case in 1865. So the author of Roe himself was a very conservative appointee, and then shocked everybody, pushing in that direction. So I think that they're in a position, and some of them have shown little inklings of being willing to do what they believe is right. And so much of this is so far beyond the purview of the constitutional language, that I think they may take their responsibility seriously.
I think the one area where you may be right, is the idea of birthright citizenship, which is it's in the Constitution. Is it the 14th Amendment? I think
14th Amendment.
14th
And the
Amendment.
argument on whether they're subject to the jurisdiction of the United States is totally laughable, not to bore anyone with the analysis, but it's absolutely laughable.
Explain. What do you mean laughable?
They're making the argument.
Oh, their argument.
The people who are trying to get rid of birthright citizenship saying they can do so because of the language and subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Well, these people are. If not, they could go commit murder and we couldn't arrest them. That phrase is really intended and covers people subject to diplomatic immunity. We don't, if they commit a murder, we can ask their country to take them away. We can bar them from the country, but they're not subject to our jurisdiction, and their children would not be American citizens. The notion that it has anything to do with illegal immigrants is laughable.
I also think that a lot of people don't realize that you can't change the Constitution by proclamation. That it requires two-thirds vote of both houses of Congress and 3/4 of the states. So that's a long, drawn-out process. I mean, just look at the ERA amendment issue, which began, I think, in 1972, and it got some confirmation by Biden, who said, "Yeah, it's an amendment, but I don't think it's been sanctified yet as
no, but it probably is an amendment. I think the analysis is correct. And the argument on birthright citizenship, they aren't saying it's a constitutional amendment. They're misinterpreting the 14th Amendment to justify their position, which wouldn't require a constitutional amendment. They're just wrong.
Okay. I think you're right with regard with your hope. I think I have a little more faith and confidence in Roberts. I'm not so sure about the other conservatives yet. I'm just, it's still a bridge too far from my view. Until the nature of the court changes. I don't know. I wouldn't rely on them. Let's see. If you look at what's going on in a kind of an Uber sense, the U.S. has withdrawn from the UN Human Rights Council, the Paris Climate Accord, the World Health Organization, and then USAID. What do we make of all that? It's really like a recession from important connections to the rest of the world, which creates a vacuum, which will always be filled by somebody else. I mean, does that concern you guys? Or do you see this? What's the Uber strategy here? Anybody make any sense of this, Meryl?
I'm looking at this thinking they just want to eliminate whatever things they can't control. And to go back to the birthright thing, last week sometime Trump questioned the Native Americans and their birthright status. And I'm thinking they were here long before the rest of us. And what is there to question? They're here, I mean, living in Arizona and living maybe not even a mile from one of the reservations. These people are working harder than most of us, meaning the general population. And I don't think they should be questioned. And I question, what are they questioning? Are they just hateful of everyone and everything? And this is why they want to get rid of these agencies as well.
Yeah, I often think, I wonder the why of it all. I mean, why, in my view, everything Trump does has a financial component to it. Um, and I don't understand what the ultimate goal is for. I mean, is it to cut spending? Is it to justify tax cuts? Is it to, I don't know. I don't know even know what America First really means anymore. If you're talking about sending U.S. troops to the Gaza border to get all the Palestinians out from a guy who was so averse to any foreign intervention. Um, I have a real hard time. I mean, I follow this stuff pretty closely, but I have a really hard time understanding the why of the overarching policies that are now underway, with kind of a feckless Congress, and I don't know. It's just I've never seen the country like this. I don't think anybody else has either, and I don't know what's going on. I don't know the why of it. If any of you have some ideas, I'd be glad to hear them. Anybody? Brad?
Well, I think there are two overriding things. One is Trump has a bottomless need to be the center of attention, and anything that moves that forward, no matter how outrageous. In fact, the more outrageous, the better, because that will get him the attention that he's looking for. And so my response is I just refuse to give it to him. So in a sense, I'm blocking out the news. This is really the only news that I listen to or read, because I just refuse to play into his to be subject to his whims. The other thing is, in terms of withdrawing from these various organizations, is that he views the world from a transactional basis. And he's not going to be part of a group where he doesn't have control. He wants to be able to make the deal. It's all about the art of the deal. And he can do that if he's if he can exact where he can negotiate one-on-one with others. We're seeing that with the tariffs. I mean, it's all about the deal. It's a combination of attention grabbing and applying what he learned in the real estate business, making the deal, to all types of relationships. All relationships are built on making a deal.
Yeah, what strikes me is with all the executive orders that he's signed in the last 2 weeks. God, it's only been 2 weeks. Amazing. And all the pronouncements he's made, and yesterday's Gaza thing, he campaigned on helping average Americans and bettering their lives. But I haven't heard one thing about housing, about healthcare, about any of these basic human needs to help people in our country. He doesn't talk about any of that, and that I guess I'm not surprised. But geez, I thought the whole idea was to kind of uplift the people who supported him so well.
Right. And that's why, I disagree a little bit with Steve, because I think the real hope is the midterms, because this overreach always results in a backlash. I mean, people voted for him because they wanted egg prices to come down.
Yeah,
they're not.
Not only are they not coming down,
this tariff policy is only going to make things worse. So
my wife told me that when she went to Costco last week, they were out of eggs. They didn't even have eggs. Which eggs? Come on.
Bird flu.
Bird flu. Yeah.
There's a serious egg shortage because of bird flu.
Okay. Well, we're not eating eggs these days, I'll tell you that. Um, okay. What else did I want to get to? I had a thought and it escaped me, which happens. Um,
Michael, if I could just go back to your question about why is this happening,
yeah,
I
yeah.
have an opinion on that and about Trump's motivation. I attribute it partially or primarily due to the dumbing of America.
Yeah.
As people are getting dumber, and it's not a nice word to use, but I'm going to use it. And if somebody can come in and say, well, all your problems are because, these people here who are coming across the border or because of this, the further we can simplify things, these complex issues to a dumb person, it makes sense and it works. So to me, that's why this country is going into this. I don't know if it's off a cliff or down a deep hole, but we're just getting dumber than we've ever been. And the second thing is what's motivating Trump. We've talked about his ego and his son-in-law and this, but I think he wants to be the first trillionaire, and I think he's going to figure out a way with Musk to steal $1 trillion from the United States government somehow, and that is his end game. Is how does he enrich himself as the president? He's not in it as some great altruistic leader, profiles of courage or something like that. He just wants to make himself a trillionaire.
Wow. I don't even know how you'd begin to spend $1 trillion. I mean, the title of Mary Trump's first book, Mary Trump is his niece who sued him over how she claims he screwed her out of her late father's inheritance. But I think the title of her book was something like "All the World but Never Enough," referring to Donald Trump, and that sort of struck home with me. That sort of made sense to me. I see there's a lot of people on the call, but their buttons are muted. If you unmute and you want to jump in, please do. There's a whole lot of people that we haven't heard from. Are Robin Greer, Helen Smeerling, Charles Wall, are you on the call? You're all muted. I can't hear you. Okay, maybe they're not on the call.
I am.
Yes, I'm on the call.
Okay, well, your buttons were muted up until 5 seconds ago. So please, let's hear from you. What are your thoughts?
I'm afraid
What are you afraid of?
I've experienced a lot of things in my lifetime, and I've been in this country for over 60 years. Unfortunately, I'm afraid of how it's going to end up and how it's treating us. And I'm also afraid as a Jew.
Okay, I know a lot of people compare what's happening now to pre-1933 Germany. Do you see parallels there?
I was not born in 33. I was born in 38.
Okay.
So I only know after 38.
Okay. But I mean, I'm sure you've discussed this with friends or relatives or your own experiences. Do you feel any similar emotions or parallels to that period of time?
To the few conversations that my parents did share, because my parents never shared the past, I do see similarities. Yes.
And that contributes to your fear to some degree?
Yes, and to be quite honest, I'm one of those citizens that has become an American citizen, and I fear that I'm going to be deported from here again. And I've spoken to several people who are not Jewish, and some of them were not born here, and they are having the similar thoughts are we going to be deported, even though we are very good American citizens and we love this country? I love this country because it's the only country where I've lived long enough in my life, and I love it. But at the same time, I have a fear.
Wow. I wish I could say something to dispel that fear.
So that's why I muted, and I'm sorry I spoke.
No, don't be sorry you spoke. I think we all appreciate your thoughts. And I think a lot of us share your fear, for, if not for that reason, for other reasons. Charles, did you want to say something?
I I had a prior commitment, so I just came on about 2 minutes before you had mentioned me. So let me just hear a little bit more of what's going on before I comment.
Okay, well, we've covered the landscape with.
Oh, okay. So then we'll do it another time.
No. Just whatever's on your mind. I'm sure we'd be glad to hear. We've talked about Trump's Gaza plan. We've talked about Elon Musk. We've talked about the U.S. position in the world as we move into this America First agenda again. So, any of your thoughts would be great.
My thought is basically that I think you just mentioned the problems, but the basic problem is that all of what you're discussing, except for Gaza, he probably let everyone know prior to the election. And with all of that, wasn't a sweeping majority, but he obviously, was elected. So whether we're blaming him, whether we're blaming the American people, whatever, to me, it's been interesting in that when you're dealing usually with dictatorships, they don't tell you what they're going to do. It comes in,
yeah.
and they just do it, and everybody is surprised by it. In this case, no one should be really surprised.
No, I think the whole thing was forecast in Project 2025, which he disavowed knowledge of, and then he hired half the people who contributed to it. And he's always been somebody who told you exactly what he was going to do. I think you're right. And I think a majority of the country thought, hey, that's great. I love this guy and I love what he wants to do. And I think, the Democrats right now are in the minority everywhere you look, including state legislatures and governorships and of course in Congress. So you get what you pay for. And I think we're getting what we paid for right now as a country.
And Trump is able to say, I have a commitment now.
Well, a mandate.
This is what you wanted. So
yeah, he says that all the time.
And the other thing is, in terms of the Democratic Party, they have to start getting in a strong leader for the future.
That's a really good thing to kick around. We had some friends over last night, and we were talking about this very subject. And Trump basically has 2 years to either succeed or fail. And then if the Democrats can control at least one chamber of commerce, there's a shot at 2028. But when you think about it, who's the next Democrat leader? I mean, who's going to emerge at least as a spokesperson for the next 2 years, and then emerge as a presidential candidate in 2028? I don't think they know who it is yet. Steve, did you want to say, were you on? Do you have your hand up?
I didn't.
Oh, sorry. Okay, Bernd, we haven't heard from you.
I would like to refer back to what Sylvia said about being evicted and that she's an immigrant. Of course, I'm an immigrant too, been here 60 years. And I'm wondering if it has to do with being an immigrant and therefore kind of feeling that you're never quite safe, which I don't feel, but anyway. Or the other question is, if she's going to be evicted, where's she going to go?
Mm. Yeah, well, that's unknown. I mean, they're sending a lot of. I think I read today there was a plane load of illegal immigrants that were sent to Guantanamo. So you're right.
Wait, the obvious answer should be Israel, right? And
Oh, Jews, yeah. I
why
was
don't we
thinking,
mention it? There's a big reason why we don't mention it. We're talking about Israel now and how what Trump is doing about it. But what we're really saying is that Israel is the most unsafe country and the most despised country. Why? I mean, why? We know why, but how does it affect us?
yeah, yeah. I don't think we know. I don't think that's going to be too clear yet. Not for a while. Oh, Helen Smeerling, I see you now. You're muted. You have to unmute.
I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to show.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, we didn't see you that long anyway.
Good.
Okay. Okay. Um, one thought I just had before we move to one final subject. I actually think Trump enjoys people suing him. I think because it sort of halts any further craziness. He gets to say what he wants to do. It's out there, and how it's whether courts support him or not or don't support him. Uh, I don't think my personal feeling is I don't think he really cares. He just gets the issues out there. Bernd, did you want to say something else?
On this, I was listening to the what is it, ABC program on Sunday, and they had the former governor of New Jersey on, who's a Republican, but not
Yeah, I saw that. I watched that
not a
show.
friend. And he basically said, well, it's so true, it's also in the paper. This is Trump's modus vivendi.
Yeah,
He sues and he says, well, if you sue, you get 4 years or more, and by then you're no longer governor. It's not that he enjoys suing, he likes it because that's his way of sort of frightening the government, the country, into doing what he wants, which he hasn't succeeded yet. But
yeah.
that's what his plan is.
Michael, did you have any thoughts in terms of a Democratic leader?
I kind of go back and forth. You know, I like Gavin Newsom. I don't know if he's too progressive for the country. Um, I like some other governors. I like Whitmer in Michigan. I'm a big fan of Hakeem Jeffries, but I don't know if these people can generate the national recognition and approval in a short period of time. There's there seems to be a lack of like elder statesmen, or not elder because age was such an issue this time, but people in their prime who have a great national point of view with some fresh new policy prescriptions. I don't really know who's going to emerge. I mean, Obama gave a great speech in 2006 and exploded onto the stage, and people fell in love with him. And he had 2 years, a 2 year run up to run for president. I don't know who the next Obama is. I don't. Does anybody see anybody out there they like that they?
I like Josh Shapiro partly because he's been successful in a state with an
Yeah,
awful lot of MAGA people. And I think people have begun to notice him. So I like him and I like Gretchen Whitmer, but I think he has a better shot.
do you think being Jewish will hold him back?
At this point, I don't, and I'm hoping it stays that way. I It's hard to tell. That's the one reservation I have, and it shouldn't be a reservation.
Right.
And I just have to keep my fingers crossed.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else have anybody that name you want to throw out there?
Pritzker. Pritzker.
Pritzker, yeah.
He's
Been
just not.
very
He's not telegenic enough.
No, he's not telepathic.
But a Ozempic, and he'll be good to go.
That would that would take care of him.
But he's also very wealthy, and if people finally get sick of Trump, that could be a negative in his campaign.
Yeah, he's also Jewish too, isn't he?
He is.
Yeah, yeah,
His family's huge in real estate.
yeah. They made their money in hotels, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else? I don't know. I don't have a long list. I really don't. Um, I don't know where to go. No? Okay. So let's talk about the fires. first of all, have any of you been affected by them? Benjamin?
Not directly.
We were on the evacuation list, and then power was shut to the area, but there was no damage.
Okay, so your
But
house.
we did evacuate.
Yeah, we evacuated for one night. We live near Hollywood, and we had a fire in the hills above us, but we only had to be out for one night. Do any of you know people who were affected, who lost their homes?
Many.
Harvey?
Yeah, my cousin lost his home,
Oh boy,
and
what's
he and his wife are okay, and he moved in with his sister-in-law,
what's
and
he
his
gonna do
sister-in-law lives.
What's he gonna do long term, do you think?
I think he's going to, at least short term, try and rent an apartment in Torrance because he has two adult children who live in that area.
Oh, okay.
So that would put him near two of his children. He and his wife would be near two of his children. He's a
I have
CPA.
at least a dozen friends and relatives who lost their houses.
Really?
At least.
Wow. I'm really sorry to hear that.
Michael, I'm a sworn with the LA City Fire Department as a volunteer, and I was on duty really for the last 3 weeks, both in the Palisades and in Eaton, different days, different locations. And the damage that I saw, and I've been to the Palisades, grew up in Los Angeles, 1,000 times, been there. It was like nothing. I don't think the TV does justice to
I
how
agree with
bad the damage
yeah.
is and the destruction. And frankly, my cocktail napkin calculation is the damage is at least 50 billion. And that's the number I came up with. I could be a little low, high, whatever. But the insurance companies don't have 50 billion. The state certainly doesn't have it. And I don't know about the federal government. So I just wonder where that money's going to come from.
Well, go ahead, finish your
No,
thought.
I think the rebuild in the Palisades, first you have to clean it up. Same with Eaton. It'll take, if it'll never be the same, but it'll take a decade
Yeah,
for it to.
I agree with that.
The village is gone. The house, I mean, it's just, you drive down Sunset, you drive through Brentwood. Brentwood's okay. Brentwood really wasn't an impact. But once you get about a mile towards the beach, and it curves around and such, not as a crow's fly, it just gets black with the burnt out.
Some of the pictures, I mean, it's hard to decipher between photos of the Palisades and Eaton and Altadena and Gaza. I mean, they look so similar, just total destruction. But what I was wondering is, and we were talking about this last night, is how many people will rebuild and how many people will just say, to hell with it, I'm leaving. I'm not gonna. I'll sell the property once it's cleaned up, and I'm not going to rebuild here. Steve, you said you had lots of people that were affected. Do you think they'll rebuild?
I haven't talked to them about that. I know a lot of them have bought other places. Some I know are in temporary places. Some who rented are renting in different areas. One of the usual attendees, Howard Weisberg, they lost their house. But given their condition, they're doing really well. They have a good attitude. They're now living in a very nice assisted senior living place in Westwood. Other people I know, if you have the good thing about people in the Palisades is some of them have other houses or the wherewithal to buy something else that meets their standards while they sort out what to do with the property they have. The people I know who lost their homes in the Altadena area certainly don't fit into that category. And I have they're all looking for temporary housing, the ones I know are currently living with friends or relatives. At the synagogue, quite a few of our members are in that group.
Yeah, I think the temple said there's 50 to 60 families who have lost their homes, which is kind of unfathomable. I mean, we have a friend who lived in the Palisades, and she lost her house, and she found out about it when she was on a vacation trip to India. And she has two sons, one of whom lives here. And she said, well, I better book a flight and come home. And he said, don't bother. There's nothing to come home to. So I know these are traumatic stories. They're horribly sad stories. And I don't know. You're right. I mean, Benjamin, you were right. I don't know where this money is going to come from. I read that Newsom's on his way to Washington today to meet with Trump to see what kind of federal aid, but how much in this time and atmosphere in Washington, I don't know how willing they're going to be to pump a lot of federal aid into a big blue state. And I think we will see just how whether this is another version of us versus them, because I just can't see relief coming from the federal government at this point.
Well, with Katrina and the pure government fault for virtually every penny of damage with the levees, no one ever raised the issue of Louisiana's a red state, ever. This is just uncharted, and it's Trump's approach, despite he actually said it once for the first time that he would be everybody's president. Nobody believes him. His first time, he was crystal clear. He's president for his supporters, and everybody else can just go to hell.
Yeah.
And with Mike Johnson just parroting that, it's sad. I mean, the federal government actually, believe it or not, if you look at modern monetary theory, can absorb the United States position in the world market is such that we can absorb a lot more debt than we have. The government can print money, and that's why we have a federal government.
Yeah.
And we're a net contributor. We take back less than we give them, the largest amount of any state in the union.
I think, Steve, you raise a good point. Think of the inflation that the rebuild will cause. I mean, I don't know if it'll be this year or next year, but they're already saying building materials will go up 40% at a minimum because the demand will be so great. And how does that impact inflation? So it's a mess.
I also think there's an issue of even if for families who want to rebuild, are there enough general contractors
Well,
out
how about architects,
architects, right? That's
structural
right.
engineers?
Right. I don't know. There's just not enough people to go around.
Somebody threw around a scenario to me that kind of made sense. I don't know how to work out, but what if like a venture capital fund came in and bought up big chunks of land and built communities that were pre-planned and organized and safer, more fire resistant. And I don't know if you buy them or rent them, or more like Europe, you have an 9-year mortgage or something like that.
We were speaking to a couple of people who said the equity people have been in already, they're already purchasing. And that's also creating a problem.
Luso and the others and the big hedge funds already talking about that.
And the other problem,
but they're going to buy it at rock bottom. They're waiting until the price drops to, I don't know, 10% of what it's now.
Well, part of the problem that we were told is that the equity funds are buying, let's say, at 40 cents to the dollar. And then when the insurance companies come along and someone is valuing their house, the insurance company says, well, your neighbor, this is what they just sold at, therefore that's what your house is worth. So
that should be irrelevant because they're selling raw land.
Right.
You insure a structure and a cost to rebuild, and your lost goods determine your damage. You don't insure the land. It's not insurable. And these sales, I don't know what the 40% is. If it's 40% of the fully developed property, that's not even a depreciation in a lot of places for the value of the land. So I think we need to know a lot more about the figures people are using and how they're using them.
What I also think is totally a hypothetical, was not anything with accuracy. And getting back to something else that was said, with Newsom, my concern would be what Trump is willing to give from the federal government, what's he going to ask in return?
Yeah. Meryl, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think another piece of this problem with the homes and the fires and everything is people can't rebuild, probably can't sell, etc., until after the land has been reevaluated. The dirt, the water,
Yeah.
the poison, the things that are in the homes that didn't burn but still have to be reevaluated to clean out and everything else. And I think before any of this can take place, those things are going to happen before they can even get permits to rebuild or get permission to move back in.
I
I
think
think there's a lot going on here before anybody can
Yeah.
buy up your property. And I mean, I just look at what happened with our camps and how long it's taken. It's not just about the money, but it's the soil had to be evaluated, the water had to be evaluated, the mud that's in certain places had to be evaluated. It was more than just people coming in and buying your property. You have to be
Yeah,
really careful about what they tell you and what can go on with, you know, what you're doing with it after the fire.
yeah,
The
I read-
Army Corps of Engineers is doing the cleanup, Ben. People have until sometime in March to file your form, and your
Right.
property will be taken care of 100% at government expense.
Well,
And-
I read this morning that it could
Hopefully.
take up to 18 months just to get through the toxic cleanup.
Right.
Brad, go ahead.
Well, two things. In terms of politicizing this, didn't that happen in New York after I don't remember what the event was, but it turned out to become a very political.
Oh, well, that was 9/11, wasn't it?
9/11.
No, not 9/11. It was after
Oh.
some
Are you
natural
talking about the
disaster.
bridge?
No, it was some
Governor
natural
Christie?
disaster in New York.
New York.
Where remember where what was the New Jersey governor welcomed Obama
Yeah, that was the bridge.
It was a flood. It was a hurricane.
or hurricane. It was some hurricane
Oh,
issue.
Hurricane Sandy,
So
yeah.
this is not the first time that it's become politicized.
Yeah.
And then the point that the other point I was going to make was that do you remember the Oakland fire a number of years ago in the Oakland Hills? My brother-in-law and sister-in-law bought a lot there after the fire with the hopes of building their dream retirement home. Well, it turns out that the homes that were being built were mega mansions, and they ended up selling the lot because what they were thinking of wasn't at all appropriate with the rest of the construction that was going on. And I've read that because of the way that the area was rebuilt, it's even more dangerous there now than it was before the fires.
Yeah.
And maybe Ben can explain that. I'm not sure I understand that completely, but when you have these areas where there's very limited access, which happens in the Palisades, it really is a challenge. I mean, there's only one way in and out of the Palisades, and that's Sunset Boulevard. And that's a real problem.
Yeah, you know what? I think we're out of time. It was a great hour. I thank you, all of you, for tuning in, and
Thank you. That was
tell all
good.
your friends to come back in 2 weeks, and we'll continue.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Okay, I've
Thanks,
really enjoyed
Michael.
it. I hope you
See
did too.
everybody.
Okay, take care. Bye, everybody.
Have a good week.
You too, all of you. Bye.